when you're the ordinary, now you're the one who sets the tone and provides the vision. From a kind of real practical standpoint, the buck stops with you. So you're the one that has to make the final decisions. I put it in spiritual terms that you're the father of that diocese. So I'm a bishop of this diocese in Los Angeles, but I'm not the spiritual father of the Archdiocese. Jose Gomez is. But now in Winona-Rochester, I'm the spiritual father of the roughly 140,000 Catholics who are there.
Welcome back to the Word on Fire show. I'm Brandon Vogt, the Senior Publishing Director at Word on Fire. It's an exciting time at Word on Fire because Pope Francis has just appointed Bishop Barron to be the next bishop of the Diocese of Winona-Rochester. We're going to talk about that today, when Bishop Barron found out about it, how the process works, what he's looking forward to in his new diocese. So welcome, new bishop of the Diocese of Winona-Rochester.
Well, thanks, Brandon. Always good to be with you. And yeah, it is an interesting, exciting time for me.
Before we get to this exciting news, let's update everyone on what you've been up to. You recently got back from New York. You took a trip there to do a Word on Fire event, and then you got to play golf at a pretty prestigious golf course. Tell us about that.
Yeah, the wonderful guy, Brian McAuliffe, who sponsored this fundraiser, is a member at Winged Foot, which is it's north of Manhattan. It's like just past New Rochelle. That's where the seminary is, Dunwoody Seminary. I've been there before. But Winged Foot's one of the most famous golf courses in the country. They've had, U.S. Opens and all kinds of big tournaments there. So I got the privilege of playing on that course. And, if you're a golf fan, as I am, to be on sort of that sacred ground is terrific. And I found the course, tee to green, to be fairly playable, but man, they were the toughest green complexes I've ever played. Meaning the greens themselves, they were almost all slanted severely back to front, but then also with all kinds of undulations, and then severely fast. So, for an amateur like me, I might not be on the green in two shots the way the pros are. I might be near the green. So I have to pop a little approach shot up, and I'd hit these shots. I think, oh, that was a good shot. That's exactly the way I wanted to hit it. And I come up to the green, and it's 35 feet off the back of the green because it just wouldn't hold, And I hit a putt, and I think, okay, that's about the right pace. I look up, and it's 25 feet beyond the hole. So it was pretty challenging to play at the greens, but I loved it. It was a great experience.
Well, golf is a good connection to today's topic because I think it was back in 2015 when Pope Francis appointed you to your current position as Auxiliary Bishop of Los Angeles. I believe you were watching golf when this phone call came through. It's a mysterious process to those of us who aren't in the hierarchy. How does this come about? How do you find out that you're a new bishop?
You remember, I'm sure, Brandon, I was with you and your family. You guys were in Chicago. I'm kind of forgetting why exactly, but you'd come to Mass. We had gone out with one of our great donor friends, Ernie Wad. And then I came back from that lunch, and I was kind of worn out. It was, the Mass and all the activity and the lunch. And I'm back home, and I just, had my shorts and T-shirt on. I was lying on the couch watching golf. And this phone call comes, and it changes your life completely. At that time, it was, the Holy Father's appointed you Auxiliary Bishop of Los Angeles, which was an utter surprise. This time around, it was also on a Sunday, which is curious to me. I had just gotten back from Kansas, right? I had the great privilege of speaking at the Benedictine College graduation. So that was a long haul, though. I had to fly there, and then I flew back through Denver, and then to LA, and then back to Santa Barbara. I didn't get back till midnight on Saturday. And then the next morning, because of that trip, I didn't have a Mass out in the parishes anyplace. So I woke up, and I just had Mass in my private chapel. Went to the kitchen, made my scrambled eggs, and I sat down at the table, and I had my phone just sitting there, and it comes up with this 202 number, which is Washington. I knew that. I thought, who is calling me from Washington? And this was 8:30 in the morning, maybe. And who's calling me from Washington? So I pick up the phone, and it's Archbishop Pierre, the Apostolic Nuncio. So I kind of knew at that point. And then what they do, he just said to me, is this Bishop Barron? And I said, yes. He said, the Holy Father's appointed you the new bishop of Winona-Rochester. And just like that, it's not, they don't really ask you, are you willing to do this? Even though, I mean, you can refuse, but it's presented to you as kind of a done deal, like the Holy Father has done this. So, I mean, I've always preached, your life's not about you, and when the church calls, you say yes. And, you know, when I was a young kid, I put my hands like this in the hands of Joseph Bernardine, who ordained me to the priesthood. And I said, I promise obedience to you and your successors. And that's what I did, as long as I was obeying one of his successors in Chicago. And then the big boss comes in, the Pope, and says, I want you to do this. So you do it, you know, end of argument. And there's no, and I'm fine with that. I think that's great. You do what the church wants you to do, and you trust the Holy Spirit is involved. So, you know, just joyfully and automatically, I said, okay. That's how it happens.
Now, when the Apostolic Nuncio mentions Winona-Rochester, were you already familiar with that diocese? What'd you know about it at that point?
Yeah, a little bit, not a lot. I knew it from, go way back to my friend John Vlasny. John Vlasny was a Chicago priest, and I, as a young kid, as a seminarian, I spent a summer as an intern with him, so I came to know him. And then shortly thereafter, he became an auxiliary bishop of Chicago, and then he was made bishop of Winona. So that's how I knew it, was through John Vlasny. But also, I should actually go back a little bit earlier. My mother's brother, my uncle, was a Christian brother, a De La Salle Christian brother. And he taught all over the Christian brother world. But one of the places that they taught, they're still there, is St. Mary's College, Winona. It's now St. Mary's University. So I knew it from him as well, from my uncle. And then when I was at Mundelein as a professor, I went up on a couple of recruiting trips because there's a college seminary still there, still flourishing, called IHM College Seminary, run by the diocese. So now I'm excited. That's my seminary now. And I did recruiting trips up there. So I knew it a little bit from these connections, but I still am not, really well acquainted with it. I'm in that process now.
It's notable to me that with this new appointment, you've now been appointed twice as bishop by Pope Francis. So he made you the auxiliary bishop in Los Angeles. Now he's appointed you bishop of Winona-Rochester. That puts you on a pretty short list of people that have received 2 appointments. Do you find that encouraging?
Yeah, and it's interesting, because I think you're right, Brandon, that it'd be a relative handful of people in our country who've been appointed bishop twice by Pope Francis. I think of my friend Ron Hicks, who was made an auxiliary in Chicago, then made bishop of Joliet by Francis. I think of Dan Muggenborg, who was made an auxiliary in Seattle, and then he's made bishop of Reno. And maybe there are a couple others. But yeah, I do. I mean, to me, that shows that Pope Francis has confidence in me, Anyone that would say, that Bishop Barron, he's not really a Pope Francis guy. Well, the best evidence I have to the contrary is the man has made me bishop twice. And so if he felt that I was somehow working at cross purposes, I don't think he'd make me a bishop twice. So I'll take that as a sign of confident support.
Let's talk about the shift in the 2 roles. For the last 6 years, you've been auxiliary bishop of the Archdiocese of Los Angeles, and now you're becoming an ordinary, the leader of a diocese. What's the difference between those 2 positions?
Well, I think it's a qualitative difference. Now, to be sure, I was ordained a bishop. You were there almost 7 years ago. Then you're every bit as much a bishop as the Pope is. I mean, you're ordained a bishop of the church, and so you're a successor of the apostles, and all of that remains the case. You're in the conference, so as an auxiliary bishop, I was a voice at the conference. I was twice elected chair of committees. I was elected to represent the bishops in Rome at a synod. So, sure, you have the full status as a bishop. Nevertheless, as I suggested, there's a qualitative difference, because as an auxiliary, my job is to give auxilium, is to give help to Archbishop Jose Gomez, who is the ordinary of this diocese. Whatever authority I have in the diocese is derived from him. It's in service of him. So I've been the regional bishop in the Santa Barbara region for the past 6 years or so. Good. I have that from his authority. I do what he wants me to do. I'm there to help implement his vision of things. When you're the ordinary, now you're the one who sets the tone and provides the vision. From a kind of real practical standpoint, the buck stops with you. So you're the one that has to make the final decisions. I put it in spiritual terms that you're the father of that diocese. So I'm a bishop of this diocese in Los Angeles, but I'm not the spiritual father of the Archdiocese. Jose Gomez is. But now in Winona-Rochester, I'm the spiritual father of the roughly 140,000 Catholics who are there, 100 parishes or so. I think that's the main difference. And, Brandon, it reminds me when I became rector at Mundelein years ago. So I'd been at Mundelein for a long time as a professor, and, I loved the students and helped them and taught them and all that. But when I became rector, it's probably like a bit like when you became a father for the first time, that something kicks in and you realize, no, I'm the spiritual father of this community, which means someone's psychologically or spiritually suffering. I'm the one that has to, deal with that. If there's a roof leaking, finally, I'm the one that's got to worry about that. If we're running out of money, I'm the one that has to, we're getting low on students, whatever it is. And even I remember this back in Chicago at Mundelein, power would go out a lot. Like there'd be during the summer, some storm would come through and the power would go out. Well, when I was a faculty member, the power's out, I've got to endure this, and I kind of put up with it, or I'd go somewhere or whatever. But when I was rector, I thought, no, I can't go anywhere. I'm responsible. I'm the one that's got to care for all these people. So I think there's something comparable now as I'm becoming ordinary of the diocese. I realize, no, I'm the spiritual father of these people. I can't pass the buck anywhere else. Say, well, you worry about that. I have the responsibility, but also the privilege. And I think you as a father would know what I'm talking about, right? The responsibility and the privilege of being the father of this community. So that's how I see the difference.
Seems to me in that paternal role, you'd have a deeper bond with the people, even deeper than you could as an auxiliary bishop, because again, you have this paternal role.
Absolutely. And I think with the priest too, and you can look at it different ways, but when you're with a priest and okay, this is my spiritual father, here's the man that's going to assign me. I'll be responsible for assigning all the priests of that diocese. I'll be responsible for the, programs that are being implemented in that diocese. So that does put you in a different relationship, yeah.
Well, tell us a little bit more about the Diocese of Winona-Rochester. I know you said earlier you were familiar with it, you knew some basics. You ticked off a couple numbers already, 140,000 Catholics, just over 100 parishes. But what else should we know about it? What excites you?
Yeah, it's a long, narrow diocese. So it's the 20 counties on the southern border of Minnesota. So you're sitting right on top of Iowa. That's why I know as a Chicagoan, I'm not that far from home. So it's a long, narrow diocese. On the far eastern side, on the Mississippi River, is the town of Winona. And that was the traditional kind of see of the diocese. You go a little bit further west, you come to the city of Rochester, which is a very cool city. The Mayo Clinic is there. So arguably the finest medical center in the world is in Rochester, Minnesota. Interesting backstory, by the way, because there are Catholic nuns involved in the founding of the Mayo Clinic. It's a long, interesting story. And so it makes Rochester a kind of international destination site. And it's often listed as one of the most livable cities in the country. Winona, too, is a charming city. If you approach it from the east, like from Wisconsin, and you're coming up to the Mississippi River, these beautiful bluffs open up, and Winona is built kind of on top of those bluffs. So it's lovely. It's a lovely part of the state. And then you go further west from Rochester, you come into pretty rural country. A town called Mankato. It's not too far away, but Mankato has Minnesota State University in it, which has tons of students. Winona has St. Mary's University, important place. Rochester has a campus of the University of Minnesota. So there's a lot of interesting schools, universities, places where young people gather. Rochester would have a lot of business focusing around the Mayo Clinic. You go out, it goes all the way to the border of South Dakota. So the far western end of my diocese touches like around Rapid City, South Dakota. They say it's about 4-hour drive from end to end. And I was thinking, my pastoral region here is about 3 hours end to end. If I drove from Santa Maria all the way to like Westlake Village, that'd be my whole region. It's about 3 hours. So not that much bigger, not that much longer. 140,000 Catholics, making it a kind of middle-sized diocese. It's not really small. There are a lot of dioceses that are in like the 30, 40, 50, 80, 90, 100,000 range. So Winona is kind of middle of the pack when it comes to American dioceses. And then around 100 priests, I think 70 or so active, and then a number of retired priests who are still very involved. Small number of order priests, I noticed that. A lot of sisters. In fact, the Sisters of Notre Dame, I think, have a headquarters in Mankato. The Franciscans who helped to found Mayo Clinic are still in Rochester area. There are a couple of spiritual powerhouse places, contemplative convents and monasteries. Very important to me, by the way, as I begin my ministry there, is to have prayerful support from these spiritual powerhouses. You know, another place very interesting, right across the river, so outside my diocese, but just about, maybe a 40-minute drive, is that great shrine to Our Lady of Guadalupe that Cardinal Burke built many years ago, because Burke had been bishop in La Crosse, which is right across the river from Winona. And I still haven't seen this place. I've seen photos of it. Lots of people I know have been there. I'm very eager to make a pilgrimage down there. So anyway, that's what I'm learning about the diocese. I visited with all the pastoral staff when I was up there for my announcement. Met with all of them in Winona. And one thing I told them was, and I think most bishops feel this way, you know, I don't see myself coming into the office 5 days a week, 8 hours a day. I think the bishop's job is to be really out with the people and out visiting and seeing the parishes and all that. But that I would be, a steady presence with the chancery. But that's what I know so far. That's what I'm learning.
You won't be installed until July 29th, so you haven't officially taken the reins yet, but have you already given any thought to what some of your key priorities in the diocese might be?
Yeah, I'm reluctant in a way because I want to get on the ground and see, what it's like, what the needful things are. But anyone that's been following me, and I'm sure this will come up in my homily at the installation mass, evangelization, the new evangelization, reaching out to the disaffiliated, reaching out to those who are angry at the church, who have left the church. That's obviously been a major concern of mine. I would savor the prospect of getting into some of these university centers and talking the faith. Obviously, Catholic education has been a huge priority for me. The Catholic identity of our institutions, that we don't allow a drift into secularism. And then, Brandon, I think a care for the poor. I go back to Pope Benedict. The church does the three basic things. It worships God, it evangelizes, and it cares for the poor. So what I have to find out, who are the poor in this diocese? How are they poor? And how is the church addressing their needs? That will be, I think, a very high priority for me.
When the news broke that Pope Francis appointed you to this diocese in Minnesota, a lot of people commented on how this state, Minnesota, is becoming a powerhouse for evangelization. You have Father Mike Schmitz, who's up in Duluth, Minnesota, in the Twin Cities, Minneapolis, St. Paul. You have St. Paul's Outreach, Net Ministries, both of whom have their headquarters there. One of my great loves, the Society of G.K. Chesterton, is based in the Twin Cities and the Chesterton Schools Network. What's going on here? Does that excite you that Minnesota is attracting all this evangelical activity?
And don't forget Bishop Drew Cousins up in Crookston. So he's my successor as chair of the Evangelization Committee, and he took from me the responsibility of the Eucharistic Revival, which I'm very happy to say is catching fire all over the country, and he's leading the charge on that. Also, the Catholic Study Center at University of St. Thomas in St. Paul. So there's a lot of energy. And then Archbishop Hebda, who's the wonderful Archbishop of Minneapolis, St. Paul, he and I have been friends for a long time. And in fact, he called me up. I remember he said, well, I'm so glad you're taking over that diocese to defend our southern border against any invasion from Iowa, So now he's wonderful, and he's a got the real kind of John Paul II spirit and evangelizing sort of mind. So I'm very eager to work with him. But yeah, I think we should find a way to bring all this Minnesota energy together. I'd love to work on that.
Let's talk about one final thing. We've gotten this question a bunch at Word on Fire, as we did back in 2015 with that appointment. Namely, how does this affect your work at Word on Fire, and how will
Yeah.
it affect your involvement with the ministry?
Yeah, and I think my last 3 assignments, Brandon, I've faced that. So when I became rector at Mundelein, there were a lot of people that said, "Why are you becoming rector at Mundelein? And you're a petty administrator at this little seminary, and you have this international ministry." And I remember that's the story I often tell is when I was confronted just that way at a cocktail party, and I said, "There's a little man in a red cape in the next room because Cardinal George was there, who can answer all your questions. So ask him. Look, I didn't, we don't make these assignments. I'm not plotting my career path. These things just, happen." But we continued. So I was rector at Mundelein, and I remember in those years, a little team would come up from our office in Skokie, and they would record sermons and commentaries. Then I became auxiliary bishop in LA. Not everybody, but some people said, "Oh my God, Word on Fire is over." Well, it was challenging. I'll give you that. Suddenly I'm, 2,000 miles away from our headquarters. I remember in those early days, you and I would do things by Zoom, but like Father Steve and others would actually fly out to LA, and we realized, well, this is not going to work very well. But we figured it out. We ended up getting different studios, now the one I'm currently in. So we'll figure it out. Now I'm being sent to Minnesota. I don't see any reason why I can't continue doing sermons, doing programs like this. We'll find some studio space, and you and I will still do this. Why I can't do commentaries? I'm still going to write a column. Most bishops do, at least once a month. I do it more often than that. We'll still record those. So, I don't run the day-to-day operations. Thank God Father Steve and Sean and others, do that. So I don't see any reason why it can't continue the same way it has now over the past, I became rector 10 years ago. It was 2012. So for the past 10 years, I've been separated from the Word on Fire office, but we've in fact, not just kept it going, the ministry has grown enormously. So I don't see any difficulty there.
You've said this before. I think you said it in your press conference when this new position was announced, that you have been giving about 5 to 10% of your time to Word on Fire, and you expect that to continue. I think people just see the enormous output of Word on Fire and the reach of all of our resources and think Bishop Barron's sitting at home doing all this by himself.
No, of course.
It's a testament to our huge and talented staff.
Yeah.
So many good young men and women who are doing this great work with you.
No, quite right. That's part of the story, is that the staff is so good and so much of the, pragmatic work is done. But also, Brandon, I think we've all been pretty clever about how we do this. So I put out a number of books since I've been out here. Pre-COVID, a lot of those books were compilations of essays, or they're, let's say the scripts I did for the pivotal players. Now that they were written over many, many years, and finally we brought them together. Just came out with a book, Redeeming the Time, which is my columns from the past several years. So what we're doing there is combining things and trying to approach it in a clever way. Then, COVID happened. And COVID was a terrible thing, but it also opened a couple of doors. And one of those that opened for me was more time for research and writing. And so I wrote my book on the Creed, Light from Light. And I did a fair amount of the Bible commentary during COVID. So, we've done what we can. And when opportunities arise, we take them. So I don't make any apologies for that. I think I did my work out here very competently. And, I got around this big region, spent a lot of time in automobiles, going to meetings and liturgies and confirmations, and managed to keep, my involvement with Word on Fire up. So we'll do the same thing. We'll do the same thing in Minnesota.
So allow that to be on the record to clear up any concerns or confusions. Bishop Barron is not stepping back from Word on Fire. Word on Fire will continue to grow and flourish and do amazing things.
As we have for the past 10 years.
Well, it's time now for our question from one of our listeners. Today we have a question from Meg. She's in Scranton, Pennsylvania, and she's asking Bishop Barron what it's like to act in persona Christi as priests do during the Mass. Here's her question.
Hi, Bishop Barron. This is Meg from Scranton, Pennsylvania. And I was wondering if you could describe what it's like to be in persona Christi from a physical and emotional perspective. Thank you very much. God bless.
Yeah, thank you. It's a cool question because you're right. As a priest, I'm operating at Mass not in my own person. It's not Robert Barron sharing his private views, right? I'm operating, we say, in persona Christi, in the person of Christ. That my gestures, my words, especially the words of consecration, are the words of Jesus. And therefore, it's by his authority that the Eucharistic change is affected, etc. When I preach, it shouldn't be Robert Barron's private ideas about religion coming out, but rather the mind of Christ as reflected in the scriptures. So that's a very important, I call it metaphysical and spiritual truth. Now, you asked about the physical and psychological level. Am I trying to impersonate Jesus? No. Am I trying to move into what I think was his emotional state at the Last Supper? No. As I record these words, I just said Mass, about an hour ago. And I wasn't moving into that psychological space of Jesus at the Last Supper. I'm assuming the integrity of this identity of mine, which came through ordination. Now, having said that, are there times when you're saying Mass that you become so kind of acutely and specially aware of this relationship that you do feel it, so to speak, that it becomes almost like a physical reality? And I think yes. And when that happens, great. But I wouldn't cling to it, or I wouldn't see that as central to it. What's central is this new identity that I received at ordination. And out of that metaphysical, spiritual identity, I do what I do at Mass and the other sacraments.
Well, thank you so much, Meg, for that question. And thanks to all of you for listening. I forgot to mention, if you have a question that you'd like to send in to Bishop Barron, you can do so at the website, askbishopbarron.com. We've talked a lot about books recently, and we have another great book coming out from Word on Fire. Today is the launch day for a new book by Dr. Holly Ordway titled Tales of Faith, A Guide for Leading with Beauty. The book asks the question, how can we share the gospel and make disciples in our modern culture? Many people are walking away from the faith, as we know, or they've never had the faith presented to them in a compelling manner. However, literature and the arts can often be a way in. This is something Bishop Barron has proposed for years. In her new book, Tales of Faith, Holly Ordway shows how literature can foster fruitful discussions that allow us to meet people where they are and help them move them closer to Christ. She covers books such as the Odyssey, the Aeneid, Beowulf, Divine Comedy, much more. If you're a teacher, if you're a parent, if you're a lover of classical literature, this will be an invaluable resource for you. So again, it's titled Tales of Faith, new book from Word on Fire. I'll include a link to it in the show notes. Well, thanks so much for watching and listening, and we'll see you next time on the Word on Fire show.